Welcome to Hispanic Biz, Stories of Success. I'm Homero Galicia. We interview business owners who built successful businesses to learn from them their story, their triumphs, their challenges. We're fortunate to be having a discussion with an engineer who built a company in El Paso called Accugraph, Mr. Hector Holguin. Thank you, Mr. Holguin.
Thank you.
Appreciate your story. We've been talking about the time that Accugraph now was taken over by a Canadian bank because of the stock market crash in '87, you said?
Right, right. Well,
And
it was
so
1990, but it was 1990.
So you're in a situation where you're owned, your stock is owned by the bank. So how did you resolve these conflicts?
Okay. Well, fortunately, Hewlett-Packard kept our $2 million credit line. In fact, they came in knowing that we'd been taken over, and I know they were coming in to eliminate our credit line. When they walked in the room, I said, "I'm glad to see you because I want you to expand our credit line, because we can continue to grow the business." They just smiled, walked away, and came back, 2 weeks later and said, "No, we're going to keep the operating line in place." Very important. If they'd taken the operating line, we'd be history. Then the only way to negotiate with the bank was to raise the money and take them out. And the only way to do that is to let's go and get a major sell warrants and position ourselves to go on NASDAQ. So we went to New York, made several trips, and we were always at the tertiary tier. We weren't at the Bear Stearns, and so we thought that wasn't going to work. We wound up with a firm out of Toronto that was a top tier company, and they're the ones that put the package together. In 3 weeks, I'd go up to Toronto every week. They brought in some of their top investors. We raised $14 million in 3 weeks. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Now, it's Scott Hulse, not Scott Hulse. It's let me think of the name of the company. But anyway, they helped us. We took the bank out. We had $3 million in the bank. Okay. That's a lot of money to have in the bank for us at that particular point in time. So we went ahead and positioned ourselves to go on NASDAQ. 3 years later, we were on NASDAQ. We had $8 million in the bank, and we had a 55 times multiplier that we give to people that invested in the warrants. Okay, so that's the thrust of getting on NASDAQ successfully. But we as owners and workers cannot take, we can't take the money out. You got to do it through stock options. You got to do it through a plan. So it's not an easy way to enrich yourself, but certainly we made a lot of people wealthy because we were able to do that. That was, I'm talking about '93. 2 years later, I knew I was going to retire. I said, the company is doing very well. There's $8 million in the bank. We're doing very well in our markets. So in my 25th year, I decided to leave. Not knowing that remember, it's a company on NASDAQ. We have a board. The person came in as CEO, decided to move the company to Dallas, and which was a mistake. And I got so upset I sold all my stock, because I just, I was angry that he didn't see the value of the company was the people in El Paso. So he dismantled that, and so he goes to Dallas. It's not working. So the only way he can keep the value, remember, we've got 10,000 customers in 30 countries, governments, military, schools, because of the work with Hewlett-Packard and IBM and others. And so the only way he could, keep the value is the customer base. He went through a couple of mergers, and finally he sold the whole thing to Nortel Networks for $395 million. Okay. El Paso lost a $395 million company. Okay. So, why? You have people now like Western Refinery, that there's a wealth creation that has to stay here and make a difference. Paul Foster is making a difference. Woody Hunt is making a difference. The great wealth in the community has to stake a future, and that's what's happening. We lost a $395 million business.
But you made a difference in El Paso, though, and you've been involved. You were involved with the chamber.
Well, if if my goal was just to build a large company, it could have been much bigger, but there's also demands for you from a civic standpoint. Remember, we're going through a period there where there was no Hispanic chamber, right? We started, as you all know, Hispanic Leadership Institute. So, 24 of us got together and we would talk about what we can do. Never talked about forming a Hispanic chamber. That was unthought of. We know that the community college would never have come here. We know that I heard that people in position kept the community college from being formed because they're afraid of the masses being educated. Okay, that's the reality. Okay, and so we were dealing with no real power base other than our ability to. Never been a Hispanic president of the chamber in its 100-year history until Arnold Peinado became the first one. I was the first president of the Rotary Club, a Hispanic of the El Paso Rotary Club, first one in its history. So you see what I'm saying? There's ground that's being broken there, but within that there's problems that can erupt that you have to be very careful with. I've talked about this to you before, and you were involved. That Maestro Chavez was our symphony conductor for, gosh, over 2 decades, and had been first concert master and so on and so on. He left to teach in Denver, came back and become the maestro or the conductor. And there came a time where there was people wanting to get rid of him, but unfortunately they wanted to do it improperly. Okay, just cut him off, no pension, nothing for the 40 years that he invested in the symphony. And we said it wasn't right, so we started working behind the scenes to do what we can to correct it. Well, it became a major conflict, and that's when you have to test relationships. And I remember that Alicia Chacon and I walked into Mayor Jonathan Rogers' office, and we said, we'd like for you to appoint us as heads of a committee to help resolve this situation, between the symphony board and the maestro. And at that time, there was the maestro and the orchestra had split from the board. They were rehearsing on their own and not paying attention to the board. In other words, the symphony orchestra rallied around to protect the maestro. Okay, so here we were trying to deal with that division. There came a time when I'm talking about probably 4 or 6 hard months, that we had to dedicate to.
I was on the symphony board at that time with your wife, and it was a tough. And Maestro Chavez had been my teacher because I had gone to conservatory. I was a musician because he'd influenced me so much. But it was your influence and your persistence and you dedicating your effort to that he was protected. They did finally give him some kind of a severance.
Right. But it was interesting because I told you that in a break that if I pray, I like to pray at night, like 2 or 3 in the morning, where I just in the quiet of the evening I can relax and let God come into my spirit, and I never bother him too much. Before I never used to pray that much because I figured that he's got more things to worry about than an engineer in El Paso, Texas. But I learned, especially lately, that do not be, talk to God, and let him know your problem, and let him resolve your problem. And it's a strength, a spiritual strength there, the unequal, that's very important. Well, one night I prayed. I knew that it was done. The next day I knew there was going to be a major eruption within. The only way to get this thing resolved is to just throw an atom bomb at it, And I just prayed on it. I said, that's just not the way to do it. And the very next morning, I get a call from Hal Doherty of the bank, president of, I guess it's the M Bank at the time. He said, there's a group of us that want to meet with you. And so I go down to one of the bank buildings, and I walk in his room, and it's filled with 20 people, all the bank presidents and leaders of the community. Not a single brown face in the group. Okay, I'm talking about, remember, no Hispanic chamber. And so I knew many of them for years because I served in the Rotary Club and the chamber and so on. So they asked me, what's the problem and who's heading up the problem? So I mentioned the name of one individual that was the leader there. Immediately when I'm asked, who does he bank with? He banks with me. Take care of it. just like that.
Wow.
That very same day, they lost the leadership that was the main force against the maestro. Still took time to resolve it, but then someone came up to me afterwards and said, "Hector, do you realize what happened here?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, they don't want a major eruption that they have no control over, because this community, is really united behind the maestro, and this could be a tremendous problem." And that was about the time the Hispanic Chamber started coming on board, and the Greater Chamber started talking about inclusiveness, remember? And so all these
Well,
these
you were
things were
instrumental.
happening.
You were instrumental in helping. I came on board in '85 to build a minority business council in the Greater Chamber. You were involved in the chamber. You were the leadership, and it was your voice always that carried a lot of weight. And we built that minority business council until 1991, and then I was acting director of the chamber. And after that year, I left, and that group went and formed the Hispanic Chamber in 91 and 92. But your influence was always strong and always important. So here's a local inventor, entrepreneur, builds a very strong company that has international clients, governments, like you say, schools, hospitals all across. Your software was the engineering software used by nations. Developed here in El Paso, developed by El Paso talent. You have some position here in El Paso as a Hispanic leader at that time. And in 1995, you step away from your company. How many employees did you have at that time at Equicredit?
Well, we probably had certainly over 100 in El Paso. But remember, we reached, we had distributors in 30 countries. So if you look at the workforce that was required to sell, support, and so on, it was it was certainly in the hundreds and hundreds, worldwide. But one thing I'd forgotten, but we started the software industry in China. We started the software industry in China. That's and
when you say we, you mean?
Well, with Hewlett Packard. And let me. During the Cold War, I don't know why I just thought. During the Cold War, Hewlett Packard kept an office in China and one in Moscow during all that time, knowing that when they got back in, they'd be there. So when the Cold War ended, immediately we were asked, "Can you receive a delegation from China?" Because part of them will come to El Paso, learn software, and the other part will go to Palo Alto to learn about the actual systems and the computers. So we received, the first delegation we received was from Beijing, very sophisticated, and a woman was one of the leaders. And we had a wonderful dialogue, but then they said, "Okay, we're going to send a group to be trained on CAD," and they came more not from the city, they came from the rural area. They arrived with an interpreter, about 6 young men, and so I greet them, wait for the interpreter to say something. Well, the interpreter was terrible, so he couldn't serve the job of being an interpreter. So here we are, we have to train them. And so we looked for someone at Fort Bliss. Does anyone speak Chinese? And we didn't have any luck. Finally, the 2 people that handled our training said, "Let us work with them, because it's computer-aided design. We can show them, and with the drills maybe they'll learn." The very second day, I heard chattering and laughing. They were in that room, strictly communicating with what was happening on the screen. They never learned English. When they left, we were toasting each other. They toast us in Chinese, and we toast them in Spanish and English, and it was a beautiful camaraderie. The same thing happened with a delegation from Moscow. The head of public works came, and they were allowed to use the older computer, which at that time was an HP 1000. They weren't allowed to get the latest computers from the from the U.S. So again, we were able to work with the first level of all the apartments and all the public works of Moscow. From that time on, we're done with our software. So
wow.
that to me is just but to me, the most wonderful experience of all, which takes the humanity, is that we had a professor in Washington State, and he said, "Hector, I want to teach drafting to people that can't, have no body movement from the neck down. In other words, I think there's voice. Through voice, maybe they can learn to use your CAT system." And he said, "I went ahead and tried it because I went ahead and put myself in a harness, and the only way I could get to the computer was by bending over and with a tongue peck on the keyboard, just because that's the only movement he had." So he said, "I think if you work with me, I think we can go ahead and start a course for people that have, that are totally disabled from physically." And I talked to Hewlett Packard, and we put together a package for him, and he started teaching, the people that had absolutely no movement from the neck down, to be expert drafters. So wow. It was simple voice commands and simple, that to me is the greatest example of the human spirit.
Wow.
And so so it's not just the young people. We had a 70-year young lady that they called me from an engineering firm in Houston and said, "We've got a lady that's been with us. She's 70 years young and she wants to learn the computer, and we don't want to embarrass her, so will you accept her in El Paso and keep her as long as you want?" 70 years young she comes. We had her back in 2 weeks, and she continued to drive for him until she was 75.
Wow.
So she was young at spirit. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Remember, you're talking about people that are afraid of computers, they're afraid of programming, and so that's what I mean about breaking the status quo.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, here you are. You're out of Accugraph now. You take a break, and you start another venture. Can you tell us a little bit about your?
Well, when I retired in '95, I didn't think I was going to come. We moved to Santa Fe. My wife's very much into the arts. So it's a way to, refurbish the spirit and stay away from the temptation of getting back into the technical world. And we really had a wonderful time for, 4 or 5 years. Then I saw what was being done with the dot-com era. Hundreds of millions of dollars were being thrown at startup companies. And I said, well, El Paso should do something. So I started, tinkering with something, and it wasn't until then all of a sudden you have the 2000, the major terrorist act, September of 2001, right? And I was approached by P.T. Wright, who heads up at that time was head of the headquarters for U.S. Customs and Border Protection here in El Paso. He said, "I'd like to protect I know about your reputation with technology. Is there some way to protect the commerce that goes back and forth from some kind of a sabotage or terrorist act?" So we started looking at that, and we put together some demonstrations. And let's fast forward, because it was in 2006 we really were able to put something robust together and ran demonstration projects. We had delegations from Washington, D.C., and we had great support. So I applied for funding from the Emerging Technology Fund of Texas, which is in place today. I mean, I just found out that Eli Velasquez, we Innovate El Paso, people interested, he's certainly available to talk to you about, starting a company. And in the same building you got the hub, which is also based to, help people. So we applied, but it was a tough process, Without getting into discrimination, we recognize that we're in El Paso. Most of the grants are being given in Austin, Houston, Dallas, and so on. So we're the first one, and one of the largest. We got $2 million. We got funded in 2007, but it took us probably 6 to 9 months to break through and stick with it to where we insisted on certain parameters, and we got it. So today, the state of Texas owns 10% of our company.
What is this company's name?
Secure Origins Incorporated. So in 2007, we got the grant, but as part of the condition, we got a valuation of $20 million. Well, this is based on the value of the technology in the marketplace. We have no revenue. This was strictly based on the evaluation, which means that $2 million came in, and they got warrants, which can become stock. So they got in a premium, so they actually have 11% ownership in warrants in Secure Origins today. But we were able to take that money and invest it. And we have an operational center now in El Paso that serves the entire border, both sides, a 1,900-mile border. And so our job now is to bring this product to where we can, in fact, you know, right now the wait times on the bridges for commercial trucks and passenger trucks is unbelievable. You know, it's over 2 hours at Bridge of the Americas, Cordova, and so what we're doing is creating a process with the cooperation of CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection, with the cooperation of Aduana Mexico, where we take trusted shipments and allow them to cross the bridge in minutes and eliminate the wait times. So basically it transforms the way of doing business, because right now the wait times are, you know, you can't predict anything.
So you've developed a technical product.
It's still, you know, it's software driven, but we tie into, we can see web cameras at the shipping dock in Juarez. We can see them from El Paso. We can see the trailer being secured, being loaded, being sealed. We can then watch through GPS. We can watch the movement of each truck to the approach lane, because it's trusted and we're following them. They eliminate the wait time. They go right to the entrance to Aduana Mexico. The goal there is to go across Aduana Mexico in 15 minutes instead of an hour and a half. The goal is to cross CBP, which is U.S. Customs and Border Protection, in 15 minutes and not an hour and a half. So you cut the potential for 3 hours or more of wait times, you cut them down to be able to cross in 30 minutes. That transforms the way that trade is moving. As it is, we have $80 billion of trade. The Juarez El Paso trade is $80 billion. And we have it all blocked up. So if we free that for the trusted trade, have a major impact in the billions of dollars, much, much larger than the impact of Fort Bliss on our economy. Just to show you that the U.S.-Mexico trade has grown from 300 billion in 2009 to 390 billion in 2010 to 460 billion in 2011. And it'll be over $500 billion this year. That's unbelievable growth. And we're sitting here talking about immigration reform and talking about our nation would have a major setback, especially Texas, if something happened to the maquila industry and the employment that's there. Texas annual trade with Mexico is the largest of all the states. It's probably approaching 200 billion. Okay. A year.
Wow. So you've now channeled your energies to develop a product that helps commerce in El Paso in a big way. And what's your role with that now?
Well, I can't. Well, it is public information. We did have a shareholders meeting, and what is this going to be? Because I'd rather wait until it's actually public to announce. But there are some big changes, which is good for what we're doing, that allow us to grow it at a much larger scale. I think if the core model has to be El Paso Juarez. Okay, we have the largest maquila plants on the border here. We have the automotive industry. The electronic industry is huge in El Paso. So our job is to create the model border that we can replicate. But from here, we maintain the control here and manage it from here, but then go to San Diego and do the same thing in Otay Mesa and San Isidro. Go to Nogales, go to Laredo. Do you see what I'm saying? It's very important that this model, which I believe we can deliver more cost effectively than anyone else, because it is modular. Everybody gets the same flavor. Everybody has the same problem. So if we can improve the logistics, the supply chains, this whole I think that Secure Origins has a very solid future. I've committed to be there 2 more years, okay? And without telling you what's going to happen, I think the important thing is that we have the talent in place and the management in place to take it to the next level.
So you developed another international business out of El Paso. So was this part of your dream to develop these kinds of products, inventions, and as you were growing up, was that a dream of yours?
I don't think. Sometimes you do have to form a vision of what you can do and deliver the vision. But I think I can always tell you that's not the way it happens. You know,